Good morning, everyone. Uh, it's a pleasure and an honor to introduce Dr. Amita Karnik, Nee Deshpande, to all of you. My association with Dr. Amita Karnik goes back almost 37 years now. She walked into the college as my just immediately you could see uh, that maturity and that willingness to be a leader as she entered the college. And all through college, and even through her master's and her PhD at Bombay College of Pharmacy, her postgraduate was under the guidance of Dr. Balla. You could sense that she always wanted to lead and do something different. Okay, and it was just a matter of time after finishing PhD that she embarked on her career on her own. Okay, and that drive is seen today also. She's at present director at two of the organizations, Amicon, which I think is a combination of Amita Consultancy, if I could
Right.
guess.
Yeah.
And maybe Amita doesn't know, it's also a very famous name for filtration devices, especially when you want to do protein purification and stuff like that. And in addition to that, along with another BCP alumni, Dharmesh, they together started another venture. I should say Mr. and Mrs. Dharmesh. They started another venture, and this time the name was based on the technology that was driving that venture, which is pelletization. So she's director at Peltech. Uh, so as both a consultant independently and as a director of Peltech, she consults both on a general level as well as very specific technological levels, especially the applications of pelletization to different dosage forms. However, one great thing about Amita is that she never wished to stop learning, and you will find as you read through the CE, which is there on front of you, that she continues to take classes online and what is called as co-curricular and extracurricular to keep up with things, especially things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, which I believe, and maybe even she agrees, that in a few years might take over the pharmaceutical industry and reduce the number of people required drastically. So in a sense, that drive to learn is to kind of mold yourself to the requirements tomorrow, which may not be the same pharmacy knowledge that you need, but also a little bit of knowledge of data analytics and artificial intelligence and being conversant with that. Okay. She has also a lot of other responsibilities. And one other very interesting venture she's part of is the academia to industry, wherein they try to bridge the gap between the postgraduate teaching colleges and the requirements which are there in the academia and vice versa. Okay. In a sense, many times the academic institutions are kind of a little back relative to what the industry needs. But on the other hand, the industry also sometimes you find people who have stopped learning. So they need to go back to academia also. Okay. Very, very interesting person. And I still remember even today all the time, because at one point when I went for higher studies, we collectively made two magnetic tapes with all the classic Hindi songs, and they gave it to me, and I still have it. It's a pleasure.
Oh, right.
And I don't even not only know Amita, but I'm actually very good friends with her elder brother, who both of us being Sunil Gavaskar fans. And
Yeah.
as you see, she's a very wonderful speaker, and she has this inbuilt ability of a teacher. Even though she has not been in academics full time, she teaches everywhere, and you can see that touch as she will talk to you. I'm pretty sure that it will be a very enlightening talk and a very information rich talk. Uh, and I'm looking forward to hearing it just like you all are. And with that, the mic is yours, the screen is yours, and you can take control of it. It's a pleasure and honor.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. And it is a pleasure talking to all of you. And also, in the heart of my hearts, I'm very happy to be a part of my alma mater, the Bombay College of Pharmacy, and Dr. Ujjwala and Dr. Krishna Priya has given me this chance to be a part of this session that Bombay College of Pharmacy has has arranged. So I'm going to open my talk. So today we are going to talk about the roadmap from innovation to commercialization. When I was discussing with Dr. Ujjwala about which of the topics I should speak about in this web seminar that was being presented, I felt very at heart to present this because, like Dr. Krishna has very nicely told about how he knows me, and for years he has been, he knows about the way we have proceeded ahead. I would like this, when I told Dr. Ujjwala, I said I would like to present exactly how I went through from my MPharm, PhD, then my jobs, and then the commercialization that we did for the technology of pelletization, which was my topic in the MPharm and PhD under Dr. Bhalla at the Bombay College of Pharmacy. So I was really very moved when I was making this lecture slides in the last week, and the whole plethora of things and went under my eyes, and I took kind of a review of all these years about how we went about doing. As Dr. Krishna has introduced, I wear 2 caps at a time. My first cap is Amicon RX, which is a consultancy firm that I started around 29 years ago. This was started with an idea to become a formulating agency for people who wanted small scale manufacturers who wanted some input for the innovative formulations in novel drug delivery systems. Imagine 30 years ago, 29 years ago, only the big pharma giants had the technology with them to put up a product like a sustained release tablet, a 24-hour release transdermal patch. This kind of technologies were only available in the academic institutes, and they were not commercialized in the market, except a few MNCs, except a few Indian pharma companies had this technology and knowledge going on in their R&D departments. So going from there, starting from there, Amicon RX was booted together with my husband, who's also an entrepreneur. He's into nutraceuticals. So both of us started a nutraceutical and pharmaceutical formulation, R&D, export kind of a firm. In doing that, I came across a group of my pharmacy graduate friends who together put up another commercialization. We thought of commercializing the idea of pelletization, which was my PhD topic. So how did we go about and how did we do? We will be here when I'm talking to you from the roadmap. Please be aware that I'm talking out from my heart, from what we did and how we went around. The subject being a technology of pelletization that was not present in India at that time. I'm talking of from 1988 onwards. 1986, I started my MPharm, where there was no pelletization machines hardly come. A couple of companies in India had those technology machines, and that too were imported from Japan. So imagine I'm talking from 1986 onwards. And today we have the company Peltech Healthcare, which is a commercial manufacturing unit having more than 80 crores of turnover, which has 70% export products, 30% of the products which go to the Indian markets. And we work as a contract manufacturing organization for most of the best of the companies in India. So it gives me pride to talk about it, and that's how I'm going to go about it. I think all of all of us all know that the innovation versus invention, the idea behind or the definition is that an invention is an idea or the bringing of an idea or technology together in a novel way to create something that did not exist before. But it is always called an innovation only and only when that invention is commercialized and you get a return on that invention. That is the creation of a meaningful form of the invention, making it available to the people, making it available to the consumers, in our case, making it available to the pharma industry or to the patients, doctors. That innovation is more about what we will talk today and how we are going and what is the roadmap towards reaching it. So let's talk about the current scenario that is there today in the post-pandemic era. As much as possible, we know that there is an existing technology that is currently available. It is not that within 1.5 years we are going to talk about unheard of breakthroughs from anywhere. And we all know that these existing technologies, it is possible to get a 3 to 4% global economic growth if we really put our hearts and passion into it. Even the government knows that the growth can be better overall. It is more equitable. That is, if the growth is not only corporate growth, it is also an educational growth, it is also a financial growth. And hence, this pandemic has provoked what could become a renaissance in the public health innovation and delivery. We all are reading it in the media. Every morning, the newspapers are showing all this. So, let's look at what were the innovations, the pharma innovations that happened in 2021. I would like all of you to read this slide for the simple reason to find out and ask ourselves, are we doing anything about in these subjects that are shown on the slides? This is what is was a analysis done for startups and emerging companies by a company called Startus Insights. Now, they have also given awards for innovation in 2021. And you can see on the right and the left of the slide, these are the examples of people who have won the awards for these technologies. Now, let us all take a minute, read this slide, and give an answer in the heart of our hearts. Am I doing anything to fall in this? Because this is the latest technology innovations which are going to be coming to our doorstep in the next decade or in the coming, and I would say in the next 5 to 6 years, because that is the beauty of today's era of digitalization. So let's all look at it. Please, or everybody who has questions, think about it. If I'm going to be able to answer it, we should all think whether the research that I am doing, the work that I am doing, in which area of this will it fall? Going to the next slide, I would like to talk to everybody because a number of students, a large number of teachers, professors have this question in mind about what would we do or how would we launch such a big technology. I would call the educational institutes, the professors, the departments as the nimble small players versus the big company R&D departments, which I would call the titans. The crux of this relationship is between the smaller nimble players. It may be educational institute or even companies like us, like Amicon, which are smaller players in the drug development space that can pump out innovative products, versus the titans, which may be dragged down by the institutional weight and scale, and because their policies are very different. I would really like to tell you that Peltech Healthcare found this niche in the market, that because the bigger players were not able to put up a complete pelletization plant because they had only a couple of products for launch and they didn't want to go ahead with the full pelletization lines. At Peltech Healthcare, we found this and put a specialized pelletization plant, a capsule filling plant, a tableting plant, a finished product packing plant. And that is where the bigger players, we have MNCs, we have the largest 10 pharma Indian manufacturers coming to us for contract manufacturing. So that is how we made ourselves valuable to the bigger titans out in the field. There's also an example that all of us have read about now, that an innovative startup companies in China or in lesser known companies like the BioNTech from Europe, which partnered with Pfizer and China's Fosun to provide us the first COVID vaccine. They have beaten the mainstay companies like GSK, Sanofi, who had huge infectious diseases specialists. But even then, they came out with the vaccines faster. What I mean to say here is that a larger company may have more capacity and the strength and a better infrastructure, but it might not be sowing the seeds for future growth in a smaller way. Like Mr. Prasad Menon showed us, that a small seed is going to grow big later. It is the educational institutes that is going to sow this seeds for a future. I have always been saying this to anybody and everybody that I met, that it was at the Bombay College of Pharmacy that this such a seed of entrepreneurship or technology was sowed in my mind by Dr. Bhalla and Dr. Tipnis at that time, that they wanted us to work on something different. Believe me, when the first machinery came to Bombay College of Pharmacy, it was right in the garden there for a month with nobody knowing what's inside. But we opened it, we read about it, we spoke to people, and there were hardly a handful in India who could talk to us about the machines, about what to use, about. So a lot of homework went into understanding the product, understanding the technology. Believe me, there was only one company that time, which was Cipla, which had these machines, and that too also was a very hush-hush job, and nobody was really able to go in and see how they are using. So we were, our batch of people who are in the MPharm and PhD at that point of time were the first people who started to handle pelletization technology products in those years. That put a seed in my mind that if there is nobody else available, let's try and study this technology, bring out more products, and that's how I can see myself in. I finished my PhD in '92, so today I am nearly at 29 years, where I have been working with this technology, and I'm very proud to say that Peltech Healthcare now has increased this technology to more than 350 different pellet products. So going ahead with this, my idea is wood. So what I would like to say is that though the industry is always on a lookout to collaborate with outsourced specialists in any innovative field, the reason being that industry is already settled, established on particular dosage forms, particular technologies. So they are always on the lookout for people who are specialists in this outsourced technology. Can our educational institute become this? Yes, they definitely can. And we are one of the examples. Peltech Healthcare is one of the examples of how we went ahead into the industry. So what did we look for? So this is what's the new normal and the post-pandemic in the post-pandemic world. CDMO, that is the contract development and manufacturing organizations, will be on a rise, which will mirror the outsourcing model and its increasing popularity. All of us have seen that the product development was done by one in the COVID world. For faster to market launch, product development was done by A company, clinical testing by B, The commercial manufacturing came to India at Serum Institute. The regulatory support came from both the companies. And so we know that in the latest norm, there is a collaboration between a number of players so as the idea is faster to market. So believe me when I say that the industry is always on the lookout for good in-depth science specialization, and which can be given by the educational institutes and the professors who are doing a lot of research in this field, in various fields, I could say. So this is what I would like to talk to about all the teachers, all the professors who are here. Where do you lie? Where are you now on this slide? I know very well that you all have a great scientific knowledge. The industry is on the right hand side where it is always looking out for new products and services. Engineering design, manufacturing design, and new product development, technology, a new additive. All these are what the industry would really be sapping at or would like to take it as fast as possible. So please, everybody think, where do you lie in this scheme of things? I know very well that the scientific knowledge you all are extremely and too good about. But are we going to bridge this innovation gap where the industry is really able to take up that and take it ahead to commercialization? If no, if we feel that there is a gap, today we are going to talk about the roadmap, how we are going to go ahead. So we are going to navigate through different steps. Though the steps are given here on the slides in a very short while I'm going to present, but believe me, I'm presenting what we did in 22 years in a 30 minutes slide lecture. And hence, I here as an opening statement, I would like to tell people who are on the session, if you have any detailed question you want to talk to us about your innovative idea, I'm always open to discuss that with you. So let's look at the different steps that any person who has a good innovative technology idea should go ahead with. Now look at this. This is the mind map for innovation to commercialization. And there, I would say that there are nearly 8 steps through which we will be looking at. And what are they? They are, the first step is discovery to innovation, and we will go through all these 8 steps as we go ahead. But have a look at the screen. Why does the screen show that this is a tangled web? It is not a straight path. It is really so. It is really so because we go back and go forth and go back again during this roadmap. We come at intersections many times and we don't know really whether you have to go back or go ahead. And to reach that sustained innovation final target that you have to go through a plethora of ideas, a plethora of steps, which we are going to talk ahead. So there are 8 steps and each slide will explain every step. So let's go to the first step. So the first step is where all of us are at the moment in the academic institute. That is, we know that we are on the path to a discovery and innovation idea. So I would like each one of you to ask these 4 questions to yourself. Do you really have the scientific knowledge and the in-depth knowledge that is required for the discovery to become an innovation? Are you interested in commercial application of the innovation or the discovery? Is the main question that you should answer. Whether experimental lab trials, in-depth science is built into the experiments. That is, it should not be that the experiment is conducted only to be printed out in a thesis or to make a paper out of it. The work should be so in-depth that we should be able to ask or answer questions on that research. If anybody, when we go ahead, we'll see that there will be a lot of commercialization aspects. Who will ask you questions? Your lab work should be able to answer those questions. The next is whether that work is innovative or whether it in the market, whether the market, the pharma industry, or I would say the pharma ecosystem really wants that. And does the innovation carry the current requirement for an export requirement? Does it have an export potential or only a domestic potential? So these are the 4 questions that every researcher should ask. The next step is invention disclosure. Now everybody gets surprised at this point asking, Amitabh, why do you want to have an invention disclosure even though we haven't reached the end of the stage? A lot of inventors, researchers in India go in for an IPR disclosure at the end of their experimental work when everything is over. But I request you and I ask you all to start thinking it as a step 2, even before doing all the work. And what should it be? As an early step of understanding, try to find out whether it has a real commercial potential for discovery. I was discussing with some of the professors that I know, and they have said that I have 2 patents, 3 patents, or somebody has 10 patents, but out of which hardly anything has gone to commercialization. So if you want a patent to be only on your name, that's a different thing. But if you feel that that technology has a commercial potential, uh, discuss this proof of concept with the industry or with the leaders, the mentors, people who are working in that field, whether that research proof of concept is really what you have. Uh, while doing this, you may come to know that it is quite a crowded field or an art. So you may have to change your research work to have some kind of a USP, that is a better selling point for your research. And a lot of times it has been found that researchers work on a particular idea, and by the time they're halfway into it, it is realized that somebody somewhere is already into a late stage of launch or an early stage of commercialization of that technology. So please, as researchers, start thinking about it as step 2, not as step 8. Now there comes the triage. The triage is an important step, very, very important, because when you are doing your objective of your research goals and the program of your departmental goals of your research that you want, as I said in the earlier slide, do the due diligence of that potential intellectual property and the market opportunity beforehand. If you know about it, try and talk to that mentor or the people interested in, ask for time from them and get them on board for your research goal. While doing that, you could go to the left side of the screen, which is talk to them about the commercializations defined by the research funding, whether they are really ready to fund your research so that once you reach the end stage, they will really buy out and they will take that research to go to the commercialization. This is a very important step. Once you start talking to the industry or the different stakeholders in the industry, you may realize that there needs to be maturation of the technology. It has always been seen that when you are developing it on mini lab scales. But when you want to launch it in a commercial way, you may have to do it in the economy of scale of production changes from, say, from 100, 500 gram to a 500 kg, sometimes to a 1 ton. So the maturation of the technology has to be done, and that should be inbuilt in your research work. While doing this, if you find that there is a no clear market or there is no competitive advantage, think twice about the research. The next step is form your company. Sometimes when you're doing your research work in an academic institute, a lot of institute help you to start, like Mr. Menon said, an incubation agency will help you to form your company. What are the main goals? The main goals are to set up the leadership team. You cannot say that I am the researcher and the students under me come and go away. So you can't keep changing the leadership. You will need to have some good people of your research team to be with you to take it to completion. You will have to set up the leadership team for that. You will also have to explore early funding resources. Believe me, even when we say the banks are there, the government is there, we are expecting a lot of others to give us the resources. But there's always a 70s to 30 rule. 30% of that, if you are able to pay, then you are in a safe zone. 70%, 80% will come as loans. The remaining is, so you have to start exploring from where your funding resources are going to come. You have to create a business model, whether you are going to remain only as a contract research organization and you are going to sell that research as such, whether you would also like to you would like to get involved in the transfer of technology for manufacturing. Then there are other ways, whether you want to do it on a loan license basis, whether you want to start your own manufacturing firm. Lots of different legal aspects come when you create a business model for that. And last but not the least, you have to educate. I know we all are very good technical people, but you need to educate yourself in the administration side, the finance side, the banking, the regulatory requirements, human resources. As a startup and an entrepreneur, your team will be very, very small. You will have to wear a lot of caps at a time, and if you are going to wear those caps, you need to know some little basic. And nowadays, 30 years ago, we had to really stand there and get and learn these things. Nowadays it is much easier to learn this online. Go talk to people. Numerous consultants are available in every kind of field, and so you can help yourself. And but I would say that the leader of the team, the director, the managing director of him or whoever it is, would always need to know the different layers and the different aspects of your own business or your own company that you are going to do, because without that they are not going to keep the herd together. They are not going to be able to take it and lead it to the further completion. So again, we come to the commercialization plan. Whatever we saw ahead in the earlier slides, this is this commercialization plan, which is the intellectual property strategy, the licensing options, and the marketing strategy together will make your company a success. So now, based on the nature of the innovation that you want to launch, this and the stage of development where you are at, whether you are on a mini lab scale, whether you have scaled up the technology, the interest of the inventors and the market potential will start to grow as you grow with the stage of development. So it's time to decide the marketing strategy for further development of the technology. Will it be as a single product, that technology, like in my case, the pelletization? I worked with 3 pellets as we started, but today we are able to manufacture 350 different pellets using that same technology, using different machinery of that same technology. In the intellectual property strategy, as I told you, very important in today's world, the leader will have to know whether it is suitable for an IP protection, whether you need a patent, whether you need a copyright, a trademark, etc. That's the legal part. Please believe me, there are good amount of legal people who will help you to discuss this. Determine the scope of protection available for the prior art. That is, at the maybe after you finish 3/4 of your work, you shouldn't feel that, oh, all this is already protected, so I cannot commercialize it. So that should not happen. You need to determine the scope of protection well ahead. Define the timing for any of the IP filings that you need to do. Today, you know that there is no patent or protection on this. It is not required. Something like this is not available. But then you put a timeline for yourself. Yes, I will file a patent at this stage. I will publicly disclose this, come out with papers about this research at this stage. Or I may not have to do it. That all depends upon what the leader's intellectual property strategy is. In my case, I did not feel that an immediate I did not feel that an IPR strategy was required for that technology, because somebody else was already doing pellets in some other countries may not have put in the pellets there. So for me, for pelletization, the immediate commercialization was more important and not the IPR strategy. So we only entered the IPR strategy field after 12 years of our commercialization of that technology. Until then, we were doing it like a Me Too technology, supplying those Me Too products to another. So we made a lot of money doing that, and then that money we plowed back into the IPR strategy and formations. Very, very important. The next step. I knew that I had the technology, I had the machinery, I had the finance, but who's going to buy it out from me? So customer discovery was another path that we had to go through. What were the 5 steps in that? First, I had to identify the potential pharmaceutical ecosystem partners needed to advance this technology for investment. Because if I did not know my customers, I did not know whether I should put up a plant with 1 machine or 10 machines. Whether whether I'm going for a local sale or an export sale. The customer discovery was an important part. When we decided that yes, we wanted to launch this technology, the next question came up was, would it be our own startup, or whether we would like to sell this technology to existing companies who wanted to take it. So we went in for a startup for ourselves. But how did we do? What did we do? We went to the other existing companies and gave them a loan license. Now, people, I don't know whether all of you are aware about what a loan license is and what a own manufacturing license is. Sometime if you want to, you can talk to us or read about it on the internet. A loan license is something that I have my company, I have extra production capacity, and another existing company comes to me and manufactures that technology in my plant. That's called a loan license. And own manufacturing. So when I go for an own manufacturing, I also need to have certain requisites that are required by the FDA, the DCGI, for exports, a COPP is required. So when I discovered that my customers are going to be export, then the different layers of legal requirement came into our work. Then it was the identification of the primary and the secondary customers. Now, what are primary and secondary customers? Primary customers are who's going to buy from me directly and fill it into the. Now, in my pellets, there are pellets that go as bulk filling to other pharma companies. So they become my primary customer. And who would be a secondary customer? Say a company A buys pellets from me, fills them into capsules, pack them into product, and he sells them to another customer, say in Philippines. So he becomes my secondary customer. That is, he's buying the product of filled capsules with pellets inside So he is my secondary customer. The secondary customer would always put the onus of responsibility of quality on the primary person or the primary manufacturer who manufactures it, the person who tom-toms about being the technology, being the R&D themselves. So that is what we have to identify. Our work is distributed into different things when it is a domestic market or whether it is an export market. All this we did as a startup team with not more than 4 people in it. But as our market grew, we had to market ourselves, go to an outreach, we had to start a website, a digital marketing. Nowadays, we have a social media page, we have, though it is not required, but to be in sync with the current requirements, marketing and business development became a bigger thing because we wanted to grow. And as we grew into exports, regulatory requirements for countries where we are exporting the products, that became our regulatory requirements. There, every country has a different way of filing the paper, filing the documents in that. Though we say that the regulatory affairs requires only the CTD kind of module to be put in, but the applications, the way it is presented is different from different countries. And that was the time when we thought that we have reached that step. But if we had to grow, the business development had to be a continuous cycle. Now, in all these steps, though it comes out in one slide, believe me, it's a work of 19 years. In these steps, you may have to get out of this road due to two main reasons. Either it is an unsustainable market for your technology, or the cost, for that cost that you are offering it, or maybe there is no market interest for your product. So you have to again go back. That's why I had that roadmap which was in a figure of 8. So you have to go back and then come back again to join. Again, what I told you, the based on the type of the customer model that we are going to identify, the criteria are selecting the prime prospects to approach and offer your product-based technology or your innovation keeps on changing. There are various branches to every work, and then you need to go into a particular branch and then specialize yourself when you are offering this technology to the others. Whatever print marketing material, whatever printing material you are going, please, in the initial stages, it should be simple, clear, concise, and though you may be a researcher, knowing the research jargon, you know it very well. When you are presenting it to the other parties, it should be simple, clear, and should give the message of the technology in concise terms. You will not get people coming to you. You will have to go out to people. You will have to sell your innovation by attending the conferences, giving seminars, webinars, networking within the pharma ecosystem. It is not only where you're going to sell is important, it is also important to know that to build your technology, to build your product, where are you going to get your raw material supply from? So a lot of backward integration, backward also you have to look that if I'm going to go give to my customer and everything to be has within the quality framework and has to be within requirement of the modern GMP guidelines, then I also have to work back with my suppliers of excipients, raw materials, APIs, the machinery manufacturer. So you need to be networking totally within the pharma ecosystem. With all this, you have now reached a stage of agreement and relationships. You have to, based on the discussion with the inventors, that's you all. I am considering the researchers in the educational institute as the inventors and the interested parties. Select the product with the maximum sales forecast and negotiate terms with them. Sign a confidentiality agreement, sign quality agreements with them. start licensing as per strategy, whether it is the existing staff or whether the faculty itself is going to do the startup. So these kind of things have to be on paper so that later on you are not misguided when the company starts to make a profit out of it. Then we will be product technology scale up. Transfer to commercial machinery is the most important part, where the research the people have to vision this. A diligent follow-up with the licensees to ensure complete transfer of technology to ensure quality and product launch is very, very important. At this stage, it is very important for the researcher to have some knowledge about how the industry works. The industry works on a total basis of a quality management system. So we need to know that before the product goes on commercialization, a lot of quality documentation needs to be done. Process validation needs to be done, and analytical method validation to be done. I'm talking of the product. I have in mind my kind of products that I have launched, but for this, the researcher should also have some bit of knowledge about this. Very, very important knowledge is auditing the contract manufacturers of the site. For example, you know that you say as a startup that I'm going to go and start manufacturing with an XYZ company who has this facility with them. Please audit that facility, go and see for yourself whether that machinery that you actually want is working and is in the perfect stage of working that is required for your technology. People may say yes to you on the phone, but when you reach there, it may happen that that is not working, or it is not, so it is going to delay all your work. So then I come to the most important point. As a researcher, as the head of as a principal investigator to their research or the technology, you are a one-man, two-man team. Train a team to carry forward the technology. Don't keep it to yourself. Train people about your ideas so that let them go out to the industry, sell your product, or say customize the product to that industry needs, so that you can concentrate on working on other innovative ideas. Now we reach nearly the last step, which is the revenue generation. Once you have started commercial scale manufacturing with somebody, the revenue generated will have to be plowed back into the commercial scale technology machines to keep abreast of the market. That is the market needs. Sustain the commercialization process by human resources, very, very important, and to successfully deploy the technology support the new research for more viable business opportunities. Believe me when I say this, it was very, very difficult for us. Though we started to earn revenue, we started to get more orders, but we didn't have people trained in pelletization. It was either they were all freshers and came to us and learned within our team. So they did not have an external outlook. So for a very long time, the human resources was one of our weakest link in the chain, so that we could take things forward successfully. Believe me, I would like to let you all know that in our case of pelletization, there are 40,000 pharma companies manufacturing tablets, and more than a lakh of people knowing about tableting. There are only around 200 companies doing pelletization, and each one is in the same boat where the human resources trained personnel in pelletization are not there. So putting all this onto the commercial path was a very, very, because we didn't have people, we had to stand on the floor and keep doing everything, keep supervising everything for a long time. Another point, I would come to that point a little later. analyze your data, consolidate that analysis over a 3-4 year period that you have collected the data for, and study that data in depth. You will find more doors open to start something more innovative in that same field, so that you can make your end product stronger by going on in backward integration. Example, in pelletization, when we were started working, we also used to manufacture the dummy or the inert cores inside, which were made from sugar. But the cost of that product was so low, and the cost of my end product was much higher. We were wasting time making the starter seeds. So we had to open up another division to manufacture the core pellets, which was in a different environment. It was not using the pharma environment, because inert seeds also come as a food product. We had to we had to develop that manufacturer. Somebody whom we tied up with already has had their things, and so the backward integration of that product, which is kind of the heart of making the pellets, that technology was outsourced, and we started getting that from the outside. What did this help us in? This helped us that to free up our capacities, and we added more products of the drug type to be manufactured in our plant. Now, we were talking about human resources in this slide, and I would really like to tell that the main problem in getting successful supervisors for production in pelletization field was not there, because we would always get approved people in tableting, approved people in production, approved people in capsules, but there was no approval for a whole dosage form of pelletization. In fact, you will be surprised to know that when we started 20 years ago, there was the licensing by our government, FDA. They did not recognize the word pellets, P-E-L-L-E-T-S. Pellets were not recognized. They were only giving us licenses in the words of granules. And if you all know about the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, there it is given which are the machinery required for granulation or granules. In fact, none of the machineries that we had in our pelletization department matched that. Hardly a couple of them match. Because being a newer technology, nobody, even in the law books also, that machinery was not written. Believe me, we had to educate the FDA inspectors about the product. We had to give them a lot of information, how it is going to be, which are the machineries that are going to, what is the flow sheet of manufacture that is going to be. So when we started this 20 years ago, it was really like, we had to go to every door, tell them about what we are doing, because there were hardly few companies who were doing it at that point of time. So that's about the human resources. It had to be developed. But we are so happy now that in last year, the FDA has come out with an approval in the pelletization department. So that shows that we will be getting more and more supervisors for our pelletization plant. Now, I come to the last few slides, the innovation management, the real Indian scenario. I know I spoke about a lot of things where you said, Madam, ये तो हमारे इधर नहीं होता है. But believe me, I'm from the same square of things, but it took me a very long time. When people say that we can succeed in 4-5 years, I catch my ears saying, oh, it took us nearly 7 to 10 years to stand on our own feet. It was only and only because of my partner, Mr. Dharmesh Shah, who's a great business leader and a business sense that he has, that we were able to commercialize this. So let's talk about the Indian scenario. But before we do that, I would like all the professors, teachers, people who are in the research to look at this slide. These are three things that have been explained by an American institute to researchers, asking them the technology of readiness levels when they are going out to the market to sell their technology. And it has 9 steps. The first three steps are the idea or the innovation. The next step is where the idea or technology may die because we don't have certain things. And if we go through those steps of 4 to 7, then definitely the market will accept that technology. So I think all researchers in educational institutes are working from point number 1, 2, 3, 4. That is, the basic principles are observed, the scientific knowledge is available with you, the technology application and the conception of the formula or the conception of the research work is done very well. The analytical and experimental critical functions are studied by the guide. They are informed to the students. The students, along with the guide, develop characteristics for the technology and the product. The proof of concepts are discussed within your internal meeting. What then you'll do at number 4 is the component breadboard validation in your laboratory environment. Very, very important step for everybody in all the researchers. But correct me during the question answer session if I am wrong. The technology or the product enters the, don't be misled by the words valley of death. This is used by the American Institute, so I used it. It is actually the slow dying of the innovation or the idea. Are you able to take your research to the relevant, are you able to validate it in a relevant environment? Or are you able to demonstrate that prototype in a relevant environment? Correct me and put questions in the chat box regarding this. Correct me if I am wrong. What we have observed in the industry, that even though MPharm students come up with thesis saying they have launched such and such a technology, say whatever tablets, floating tablets, this tablet, that tablet, pellets with this release pattern, pulsatile release patterns. But if I tell that person that, oh, good, now take your complete thesis and whatever is the best prototype that has come out successfully in your thesis, please demonstrate it on the commercial scale. So if your thesis says that you have made 500 tablets, convert them into 5,000 tablets at the lab scale level in the relevant environment. That's the R&D that is there. And I have seen that more than 75% of the time, the person who has worked on that research work, even for their MPharm and sometimes for their PhD, are not able to replicate it in the industry lab. And there is where the validation fails, and the idea is then left at that, saying, oh, this is not going to work. Once you can show that it is working in that relevant pharma lab environment, the lab will help you to prototype the demonstration in place for a larger value. Say, for example, you had done only 500 grams, they will help you to take it to 50 kgs in their factory, in their premises. And believe me, the economy of scale changes the problem scale also. And once you are qualified at that 50 kg level, which we could call it as the flight level and the go level that is there, through test and demonstration, analytical requirements, the regulatory requirements all being in place, then you can say that your product or your technology has then reached the flight stage, or yes, green to go kind of a stage, where you will go through it successfully in your production manufacturing. So 7, 8 and 9 are the acceptance level. You can see 7 lying between both. You may fail at the prototype demonstration. So you may have to go back to your think board and think where do you need to change it, and then come back to the technology readiness level. So please, all researchers, these 3 things, keep it as a score sheet for your research. The technology readiness level. The next is manufacturing readiness level. The manufacturing readiness level goes in parallel with the technological readiness level. It also has 9 stages, and it goes parallelly through the same. From stage 1 to 4, manufacturing readiness is considered to be at your lab environment. But the manufacturing readiness at the commercial plant or the commercial R&D goes up to step 8, and only when you show that it is properly scalable, properly operable in uh, the paradigm of the quality management systems, the risk management things, the analytical method validations, process validations, that are going to be done on the manufacturing batches. When all that is there, then the industry is going to accept your manufacturing readiness level. Commercialization readiness level. If you have started thinking from day one as the step one, whether the research that you are going is going to have a commercial impact, then you always know throughout your journey that the commercial readiness level is always going to be there once you're building it. Sometimes it fails to take into account the intellectual computing power, the appetite for risk, the wayward decision making of different business owners and leaders. A lot of times, researchers I have seen are frustrated because they have done a lot of work, and when they take it to the market, the business owners or the leader whom you think could take up that have certain different ideas about the whole work that you have done for 3 to 4 years. So don't be disheartened if you have that in your heart and you know that it is going to work. You should go it. A lot of times in the earlier times it was, or maybe 20-30 years ago, when people were developing new technologies or newer dosage forms or newer, they were like building the engine while flying the plane. They were learning and applying the systems, applying to many small businesses. Even mine, even ours were like that we were learning on the go and then putting the things, and we didn't have the vision to take a risk before all the boxes were ticked, because we had already put in a lot of money into the research, into the plant, so we didn't have all boxes to be ticked out before we started commercial manufacturing. So a successful commercialization strategy was taken up. Let's start, and on the way, whatever comes, we will have to change it. That was in the initial 3-year period. This maybe nowadays may not be very really possible because the time has changed now, and most of the things can be put onto a digital platform. You can get to know the analysis of all your work. There are a lot of people now available to advise and consult you. So please understand that if the researcher has to take the technology to commercial, you need the company needs to know that they may face regulatory and quality audits if you have not inbuilt the quality work into your research. So this is a small thing that I have put up. Most of the things have already been spoken about, that you should be very clear about the process, product technology map and the pipeline, the pricing strategy, how you are going to promote and differentiate it from the market, where you are going to raise funds. Put your work into 2-3 phases: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1, who will fund, you will raise the funds from where whether it's family, friends, yourself. The next is whether you're going to go to the banks. The next is whether you're going to go to the government. How are you going to sell it? How are you going to carry out your sales? Example, I have told you a lot about discovering your customer. And last but not the least, be aware of the competition that is there around you, because when we say that like ourselves, there may be many people who are going to jump onto the bandwagon and know that this is a commercially sustainable technology or a model for a product. A lot of people are going to compete with you, so you should be aware about the superiority of your product, your deliverables, what time you're going to do, whether you have a good R&D base, whether you are going to give to your customer a full docket of your research. All this is competitive awareness, and that will take you ahead. I come to the last two slides of my talk, and you can hear the passion about my work in the way I have been speaking. But please understand the insight to the whole talk. The insight is that the pharmaceutical industry is rife with a lot of opportunities for large and small pharma companies, and especially for providing ancillary services and for helping to define the policy frameworks, provide educational, infrastructural, human resources. This ecosystem of the pharma industry has numerous opportunities. So this ecosystem relies on to propel it forward to uncharted territories, explore pockets of opportunity, be there to open the door when the opportunity strikes your door. Don't be laid back, be more confident when you are going to. Even if we say that yes, something less is there in my research, you can always tell that yes, we will do it. Like I had said earlier, you can catch hold of the customer and tell him, yes, I have finished 50%, but if I want to give it to you, I will need so much work to be done. So could you fund my this research? So the opportunity for the technology exploration and commercial advancement is with our researchers from educational institute who should explore these such opportunities. And I would be very happy to say that neither ideas or the nor bright minds are in short supply in India. We have them, but the brilliant minds that are dreaming up the near impossible things or creatively solving difficult business challenges might need the support and understanding of the process and the framework how to accelerate this development and discovery to commercialize and market it. Hence, the gist of the whole thing is work in collaboration with the industry stakeholders, work with incubation centers who will let you know what is required. I would feel that the incubation center should be a part of the educational institute, because in an educational institute there are researchers who are working on a chemistry of a product, on the formulation of the product, on the analysis of the product. So you all could team together to bring up a complete package, not that only a developed formulation is looked into but no analysis of that is looked into. Because if you go as per the new ICH quality management guidelines, you cannot take a product or technology to the market unless you have the full docket ready. So you all will have to also collaborate between your different departments in an educational institute working towards the same product or technology, so that when you go out to sell, you will be touching upon most of the 80% of the quality requirements in a research. Even the research methodologies that are being done in our educational institute need to change as per the the industrial requirements. We are still, I believe me, that when we read thesis, when we read some of the work that is being published, it seems to be like a cut paste copy research work from many institutes which look to be the same. Only the drug keeps on changing, and the work that is submitted, the work that is there, yes, it helps the student to understand how it has to be done, but the researcher at the head, the chief investigator at the head, needs to open up the ideas and then go towards the what the industry or global industry requires. With that, I finish my talk and I'm open to questions. Thank you, everybody, for the sound listening.
I request Vivek or somebody to just look at the chat box, and if there are questions.
Sir, I can see your raised hand. Mr. Vijay Shiv Pujay has raised his hand. I'll just unmute him, and he can ask the question.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Vivek. Good afternoon, Dr. Amita. This is Vijay
Good
Shivpuje.
afternoon, Dr. Vijay. It's nice to talk to you after a long time.
Yes, same here, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, it was a very wonderful session. I have couple of questions which are like, with respect to your area of expertise as well as the presentation. You spoke about quality audits at the organization level. And what we generally see is at the academic institution level specifically, there is a lack of these kind of amenities or the quality control basically, so since I've been working with a lot of institutions as well, and one of the major concerns has been especially when we speak about commercialization, is how can we manage these quality controls at an academic institution level, especially in the research lab, wherein there are multiple students or multiple people or guide are working simultaneously.
Okay. Uh, the thing that I'm going to tell you is something that I learned in the Bombay College of Pharmacy during my student days. What Dr. Tipnis or Dr. Bhalla also had done at that point of time, I know the times are different now, but please believe me when I say this, the equipment that is there, the quality control equipment like the HPLCs, GCs, XYZ, the equipment that you have in the lab, there is a chemist or the analyst level person with experience put up there as on a job on that. That person is in charge of the equipment, taking care of them, calibrating the equipment, seeing that everything is kept in place. Because as you rightly said, students are students. They will start the machine. They may not necessarily wash the column properly, keep the column properly, may not, because they may not have the knowledge also. So it becomes a part of the educational institute to appoint somebody with experience to take up there, because it's like a white elephant. One GC goes bad, you are going to spend a lakh, 2 lakh rupees, and if it is not there in your budget, it is going to remain like that. Even for the pilot scale up equipment, the machineries that you all have, you should have some kind of a couple of people, two operator level people who will operate the equipment and teach the students about how to operate the equipment, the MPharm and PhD students. And there should be somebody who's in charge of taking care of the repair and calibration of those equipment. So that is how the institutes need to know that they need to have some kind of such input, because the research guides are so busy with their work that they are not going to go every day to see whether everything is calibrated, everything is washed properly, everything. I had gone to one of the institutes where they had such a lovely pilot scale lab, and as a pelletization person, I went to look at their fluidized bed coater, because that is an equipment that I love. When I removed the container of that equipment, a steel 316, that is SS 316 steel equipment, was completely rusted from inside. Bahar se somebody was cleaning it, but they didn't know that inside that equipment just went out. Nobody could use it because there was some kind of a chemical reaction. Some student 2 years ago must have kept the chemical inside. Nobody who had opened and seen it. So there should be people who are looking into it. And like in our factories, we have a person who will go and take a round. We call them the GMP in charge, who will go and check the equipment, the calibration, and whether things are kept properly. So you need to have kind of a internal audit person to go around and have a look at it.
Yeah, maybe one of the options that we can suggest is kind of outsourcing part of it to maybe a smaller organization which can provide these kind of services.
Currently, I would say there are not much, but I can tell you that there are so many ex people who have retired. There are so many ex production operators. People have lost jobs in COVID times now. Operators have lost jobs, or you can really actually, if somebody is there, they can find out such kind of people and give them, maybe you're not on a salary basis, but on a pure per day visit basis or something like that. But when you put a salaried person there, then they really look at it every day. You cannot have a person coming once a month and finding out, oh, something has gone bad.
Okay. Ma'am, also I had a question about this what particular term that you used, commercialization readiness level, CRL basically. And
Yes,
like, the way you
yes.
mentioned, most of the scientists or the academic institution, they develop a product, put their, let's say, heart into it for long actually. And at the end of the day, kind of like, I remember the specific word that you use is disheartened basically once they go with the product basically. Ma'am, how can we avoid these things? Because, of course, for any master students or researcher, even for the guide, the time or the resources that has been put over a longer period of time is really crucial. And how can this be? I mean, just few, maybe few examples wherein this has been avoided, because based on your experience, a very long experience, I would say, wherein these kind of issues were kind of tackled, or maybe what I want to know is any successful case wherein, like, the product was commercially ready once it was actually developed in the academic institution itself.
What should be? I there are three. It has to be a three-pronged attack. One of the attack that is to be there is to actually with the this thing. It is actually with the student or the chief investigator and the student looking at it as a commercial thing from day one. So even before going into, I think that my guide, Dr. Bhalla, had that vision because he had a great network in the industry. He knew what the industry required. I'm talking of 30 years before, because all the products that we did, like the pelletization, the transdermal patches, the I would say sustained release, controlled release tablets that were new at that point of time. So that kind of a networking the professor should be having in the industry. Point number two, which is today's point and problem, the networking doesn't happen face to face. People are on the on their laptops or their mobiles. I have 1,000 followers on LinkedIn, but I don't know who they are. Even though I may have a knowledge, I am not able to give it to them until somebody asks me a question or until somebody. So it is like that. So the networking has to be face to face, get to know. A lot of students, when I ask them, did you ask your seniors how they are doing in the industry? What does the industry require? Did you choose your product as per it? No, there is nothing like that. It was always said that my guide gave it to me and I did it. And the third part, there should be the fire in the belly to go out of the comfort zone and work towards it. If you say that, even me, I came from a research background. I worked in the industry for 10 years and then went into the entrepreneur requirement of commercialization. But those 10 years, every night I used to think, मैं इसको कैसे commercialize करूं, because I had to work on other products because I was working for somebody else. But that thing remained in the mind, saying no. So that made me read, that made me get in contact with machinery manufacturers, talk to people. So at the background, that fire in the belly and that passion needs to be there.
Yeah, ma'am, just one last question from my end is more about Amecon RX actually. Like, as you mentioned, you've been commercializing the products in India, and I think you have moved beyond India as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So through loan licensing and all. Ma'am, were there any specific learnings, like, when you try, like, had commercializations in for the products in India and abroad? Because, like, generally, based on our experience when we work with these academic institutions or MSMEs even, for them commercialization has always been restricted to domestic market actually. But when we actually think, because as you know, post COVID everything is global, like, we have access to everything globally. And so what were those differences, or what new challenges were there which you faced going globally, ma'am?
Very nice and a good question, because the mentality of any foreign person asking for your consultancy is you're competing over to a lot of people all over the world. The first thing I learned in that is that you should not have the Indian chalta hai attitude on you. They will ask you questions until you become uneasy. That's why I had said to somebody in the, they will ask you questions about your research until they make you uneasy. So you should be, so you should know your research well. You should know your research well in and out.
Okay,
Also,
thank you.
you should have that confidence. They should have the confidence in you to show that you have done some kind of a work. Only then they will start giving you that work. And for that, networking is important. You have to go and attend seminars abroad, the conferences abroad, make your face seen all over in some parts of the world where you are doing these kind of things. Then they will get that once you personally interact with them, they'll come to know the depth of the knowledge that you have, and then the projects will come over to you.
Yeah, ma'am, and specifically since we spoke more about quality as well, what were the major
Hello.
differences when we
Yeah.
speak about the quality
Uh,
systems in India and abroad? Yeah,
Yeah.
this is my last
Hello.
question.
Yeah, Vijay sir, because there are a couple of other questions and hands raised, so I would request
Absolutely.
you to please, yeah, yeah,
This
Vijay
was my
sir,
please.
last.
Vijay ji, we can always talk on the phone whenever you want. Yeah. Anybody else?
Uh, yes, ma'am. I have seen Dr. Alka Mukne, ma'am, has raised her hand. Ma'am, I would
Yeah.
request you to unmute and please ask your question.
Thank you, Vivek, and hi, Amita. Thanks for that very informative session. And again, I would like to say absolutely admirable and commendable that you had a startup when startup was not a buzzword in those days and ages.
Yeah.
So it required a lot of courage in this. My question is that pharma being such a highly regulated sector, and you
Yeah.
yourself mentioned in your, so it is bound to be very capital intensive. There are bound to be a lot of failures. In your talk, you also mentioned that you should look at the ancillary industry as spaces which startups can occupy.
Right.
So, if you could just elaborate slightly on that. And adding to that, what I also wanted to check with you is with the industry 4.0 and pharma 4.0 very much there, digitization being the next big thing now. Do you
Yeah.
see digitization somewhere here as a space which startups can look at exploring?
Uh, yeah, I'm also in the learning phase of digitalization and what it means because I'm from the earlier generation. So for me, I would like to tell you about the ancillary industry in this case. I would keep myself to answering to that, please, because I'm not very great with the digitalization field currently. So the ancillary industry to the pharma industry is everything to do with the raw materials, the APIs, the machinery manufacturers, and as well as the quality control labs, the CROs that do your bioequivalence, bioavailability work, the regulatory field, that specializes in filing the regulatory requirements in various countries. So the complete ecosystem is a huge ecosystem. So even for your product and technology, I again and again I keep on saying that you need to network with these individuals. You need to find out who are in the market for this, not people from your college only, but maybe somebody from Delhi, maybe somebody from Hyderabad, maybe. That is going to give you a better understanding of the project that you want to do. Unfortunately, we don't meet such people every day in out because we don't have such groups which interact. Nowadays, LinkedIn allows us to interact with a lot of people and ask such questions and so on and so forth. But I would say that the ancillary industry, I can give you examples like I gave you the example of the nonpareil sugar pellets manufacturers who came in the last 20 years. There are people of regulatory filings who are doing regulatory dossiers in the confines of their office and giving it to a number of people. So like that, a lot of ancillary things can come up. What you said about the digitalization field, yes, I know a little bit part of it, that the regulatory work has become much easier because you just need to sit in the confines of your office and yet do work for a number of pharma companies all over India. Digitalization also has helped, like for example, nowadays, desktop audits are allowed to be done. So that is one area where but you can become an auditor only and only if you have some experience from the industry. So these kind of things are areas where people can enter into.
Thank you, Amita.
Thank you, ma'am. I see Gulam Javed sir has raised his hand, so I would request him also to unmute and ask his question.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. Ma'am, I want to know in big cities or metro cities, the opportunities or industries are many. But
Yeah.
for the students who are from small town or say rural area, they don't have that much
Yeah.
interaction with industry or industries are as not many there in that area. So how should they start or how the institute should start? What they can do in small towns or rural area?
Yeah. This is a question very dear to our heart, and we have a lot of educationists who are with us, like Dr. Mala Menon, Dr. Hemlata. We have started something which is called as the A2I, that is Academia to Industry Interaction, Bridge the Gap. And our idea basically is to go to colleges in the interior of the India, so Maharashtra or Madhya Pradesh or here, and interact and give the students a total outlook in 4 areas of work: regulatory sciences, quality compliance, then we have formulation development and operations. Quality operations is something to do with production and operations together. So we give these kind of courses. Nowadays, like us, we have with us Dr. Parizad, who is industry stalwart. We have with us Dr. Ajaz Hussain, who is an USFDA, ex-USFDA person. So in spite of us not being there with you at physically at your college, but we interact with your student. We take a weekend course for 3 months. So we take them up for whatever specialization that they want, and we give them a total idea. We have a one-to-one interaction with them. We give them time to talk to us, advise them. So this is how we are doing it. I think there may be some other groups also who may be working in such a kind of an environment, so that it nowadays, as we said, no, the online meetings, online webinars and online things have become very easy and people have accepted it. So during COVID times we have done that, and we have trained more than 90 students on it in the last year. So if any of the people want to get in touch with us, please do, because we give this courses from college to college.
Yeah, thank you,
Amit,
madam.
how
Thank
are
you
we
very
doing
much.
with time?
We will definitely get back to you for that.
Yeah.
And I have two questions in the chat. So, sir, would it be okay if I just read them out and maybe madam can answer
Yeah,
them?
yeah. Sure, go ahead. Okay, just
Okay.
before you ask the question, I just wanted to add to what Dr. Amita said in terms of
Yeah.
the ancillary industry. Even the excipient industry and packaging industry play a
Yeah.
very big role. And also the contract research, which involves BA/BE studies. Those would also be things where you can get in.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Vivek.
This answer, in this, I wanted to tell one point, and we had been trying to do this. A little bit of information that I would like to give all the pharmaceutical chemistry professors, researchers who are there. The industry is always looking out for pure impurities of drugs. Say, for example, I have an atorvastatin calcium drug tablet that I am making, but I require the impurities to be injected to know the RRT values of the impurities when they'll come out, and I don't get them until and unless it's very expensive for the SMEs or MSMEs to buy them from USP every time. It's a very big field for you all to enter. because the requirement of the impurity is on a lab scale. Hardly 10 milligram impurity is required to do that work. So whatever work that you all are doing on a lab scale, like Dr. Krishna does a lot of chemistry, pharmaceutical chemistry work, synthetic chemistry work. So in this kind of places, you all can go and you all can collaborate with the industry and find out what impurities are required. I know of a person who, after finishing his PhD, during his PhD, had faced so much problem of HPLC water that he started a company supplying HPLC grade water to the industry, and he is doing very great now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Vivek.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, the next question is actually an extension of this, and it's asked by Nilima, Dr. Nilima. She's asking,
Yeah.
how do we generate financial support for development of a product? Because as academicians, we always are able to develop the product in the lab, but we somewhere lack the facilities for commercialization. So if you can throw some light on this aspect.
Yeah. So in this case, collaborating with the industry is very, very important. So I would say that you have to get out of your comfort zone and start writing to any Tom, Dick and Harry where you know that they are going to use this technology. What will they say? They will say no. But maybe you will also hit somebody's who has this same requirement in mind, and they may be able to open it up to you. A lot of things that I have seen nowadays is people don't want to go out to, I'm not saying Dr. Nilima about you, but about a lot of other people, is where people are not going out to talk to others. Everybody is ensconced in their own shell saying that we are doing this, thinking that somebody will come to you. You have to go out and talk to people.
Yes, I think this answers the question. And the last one, ma'am, is by Dr. Harita Desai. She's asking, at the
Yeah.
commercialization stage, how can
Yeah.
successful translation of technology be ensured from pilot to the production scale?
Pilot to production scale, whether it is from the research educational institute or whether it is a company's R&D to their commercial thing, there is always a technological the requirements and the problems that are seen are very, very similar to both educational institute as well as the industry. The industry R&Ds know that they have been facing this every day and every day out. So what the R&D educational institutes have to see that the companies are always working against time when they want to change from an pilot scale level to commercial, because when they are going to manufacture commercial, a timeline or a deadline has been set already. So we have to vision what problems will come during the technology transfer. So we actually in the industry have a whole booklet that has to be made, and we have to check boxes for transfer of technology for pilot scale to the commercial scale, so that we don't start repairing the batches on the commercial scale. Even then, out of there is a 1% chance that will happen. So then the researcher should keep their head on their shoulders, not get tensed up, not get stressed up, but think out of the box about how the problem solving will be. I hope, Harita, this answers your question.
Yes, ma'am. I think Dr. Harita has put thank you. There is
Yeah.
one last question that I'll take from Dr. Sunil Kumar Savita, and is asking, kindly throw some lights on fake manufacturing of drugs during this COVID pandemic.
Dr. Sunil, I am not the right person to answer a question at all. The reason being, I don't know what is fake manufacturing of drugs. We don't do it, and I don't look left and right in my factory or in my consultancies, and this is a no for us. So I don't think I'll be able to answer this question.
Yes, I think with that we end our Q&A session, and I would now like to call upon Dr. Ujjwala Shinde to felicitate Amita ma'am for her very insightful session. Over to you, Shinde ma'am.
As Shinde ma'am comes in, I'll just take this opportunity to address the last question. The question of fake manufacturing is not something only for COVID. It happens all the time. Okay. Because the healthcare industry is fairly profitable in terms of uh, you know cost of some of the medication. So the unscrupulous elements, they really don't care whether it is COVID or not. They really don't care whether people are dying or not. So it's an industry which flourishes all the time. And just like almost everything is duplicated in a sense, and you get substandard materials. So it is up to the regulatory authorities to keep a check on it, and it's up to us also never to encourage any of those habits and inculcate good habits in our students when we teach them and when we do research with them. That the correct way to do things is to be always on top of the table and follow all the laws and regulations of the country. That is the only way around. Is what is there?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Iyer and Dr. Vivek. Um, we conquer the transformation of any research into the market solutions should be one of the institution's essential contributions, not only to India, also the global community. The complex nature of translation from innovation from academia to commercial setting poses numerous challenges, both from financial and regulatory perspective. However, with the right strategy, it is possible to bridge the gap from idea to tangible product, having financial sustainability in the marketplace. Dr. Amita, please accept our thanks for such an insightful talk and sharing your real life examples. We extend our appreciation for your valuable time with a green token of appreciation which our research school scholars and security staff, Mr. Dashrath Dhumal, have planted neem plant on behalf of you in our BCP Green campus. Saurabh, could you play the video, please?
Uh,
That's a beautiful gesture. And this is the BCP gardens that we always used to be there, and uh, we love the greenery there. Thank you very much for this gesture.
Yeah. Remembrance of your association with FDP, we please accept e-certificate.
Yeah.
Thank you once again, Dr. Amita.